Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Ash on Comics, where I talk about just general things about comics and the industry and whatever comes to mind. Whenever I'm not doing a review or any of the specific type things like a pull list video, I'm just going to call them episodes and we'll go from there. This is my show notes for today. I want to talk about Comicsgate, crowdfunding, Move the Needle, and Donald DeLay. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. But first, Steve Ditko, as I'm sure everyone is aware, Steve Ditko, comics legend, passed away a few days ago. And may he rest in peace. May his contributions to the industry never be forgotten. I hope myself to learn more about his contributions. I have to be honest. I am not a Steve Ditko fan, I guess you'd say. Not because I have any dislike of him. I just don't know much about him. There's a lot of controversy behind Ditko, apparently, in relation to Jack Kirby and then Stan Lee. And, you know, there's some camps that talk about how Stan Lee kind of stole all the credit and vice versa, whatever. I don't actually know the details, and I'm not going to get into it. A lot of people way more educated on this than myself. It's just, I recognize, you know, my own lack of knowledge. I'm a little disappointed in myself because he is such an important person in the community. And it's very sad to see some people taking this opportunity to rip into him now that he's passed. You had all this opportunity to rip into him before. You'll have all this opportunity down the road. Now's the time to be respectful and remember the good things. And if you don't have anything good, if you don't know, just shut up. Comicsgate. I want to talk about Comicsgate. Unranked Chevron is a prominent member of the Comicsgate community, but does make some videos. He made this video called "What Do You Want Out of Comicsgate?" To which I listened and enjoyed, and you should watch it yourself if you're curious. And I commented what I wanted out of Comicsgate. I want honest integrity. I should have said honesty. I want honesty, integrity, maturity, and respect. Above all else, I want to see comics return to being created for real fans again. Honesty. I want comic skaters to be honest with each other and even to SJWs. Lies and deceit just make us like them. Integrity. We can't hold ourselves as better if we aren't actually better. Comicsgate doesn't exist for any one of us, but any one of our actions reflects on Comicsgate as a whole. Maturity. We should be above the antics of high schoolers. Cliques and gatekeeping are immature tactics for those who want to be part of the cool kids. Respect. Comicsgaters are people too. None of us are immune to making mistakes or saying something stupid. We don't use this as an excuse to ostracize, and we don't eat our own. Be good to each other. This is 5 days old, so I kind of been writing ideas down to do this episode, and this is one of the things I put down. I just really wanted to talk about it because Comicsgate is always sort of in the air, and people are coming into it every day. There's people who have been around for years, and then there's someone who came into it just yesterday. So it's important as we keep this conversation going to refresh and to think about what it actually is. Because otherwise, ideas can distort as new people come in, have maybe a misconstrued view, and then perpetuate that misconstrued view further to newer people who come in, tomorrow, and we lose the message. Kind of like what's happening in Move the Needle, which I want to talk about. these points aren't the points. These are just my points, but I think they're very important. I think these are things we need to consider. Comicsgate started out of, I think above all else, the poor quality in the comics industry. And many of us recognize that poor quality is coming from the SJWs and this political agenda. But it's not the SJWs and the political agenda themselves that are the issue. They're the catalyst for the issue, which is ultimately terrible comics. That's my dog. It's easy to derail on this and start making it very political, and I'm guilty of this myself. I am a political person. I tend to be a kind of a contentious person, and I try to hold back because it doesn't always easily win you friends. But I think if we can focus on the core aspects... Jeez, dog. Calm down over there. That Comicsgate will get back on track and be what it's really meant to be. And this is also important because our enemies are constantly trying to find ammunition against us. And if we fall into their traps that they're always trying to set to, make us look like bigots or misogynists or whatever other ists that they can come up with, and we fall into this sort of war of animosity where they're just the enemy and that's all we start really caring about, we lose our point. These are the things that I came up with that, like I said, I'm not making the law of Comicsgate. I'm not trying to pretend that I am. I'm just trying to give people something to reflect on. Maybe you have your own ideas. Maybe you agree or disagree. I don't know. But I think as a whole, from what I gather from most Comicsgaters, even if these tenets themselves aren't strictly aligned to their own ideas, I think we can all come together as a whole to understand that it's our principles that make us different and make us better, not because we voted for Trump or because we like comics from the 90s or anything such as that. It's that we want things like this. And when you have things like this, and then you let comics just be something that talented artists and writers can deliver stories, everything else just falls in line. Those are the end result. Anyways, I'm not going to ramble on any further. I just wanted to get my comments out there about what I saw Comicsgate as and what I wanted. Please, if you have anything, different to say, I would love to hear from you. Next is crowdfunding. Right now, the big topic, and I'm a part of, is crowdfunding comics. A lot of some of these Comicsgate professionals, like Ethan Van Sciver, is the number one. His Cyberfrog comic is just blowing up huge. Kind of piggybacking, if you will, off of Diversity in Comics, Richard C. Meyer, his Jawbreakers comic success. These two are sort of, you would consider pillars of the community in Comicsgate, and Ethan was already a very highly regarded and popular professional whose majority of his work was through DC Comics. He had an X-Men run. And these guys are blown up huge on Indiegogo. I think Jawbreakers is over 1/3 I believe Ethan might be at 500,000. I haven't checked recently. And what we're seeing is what we should expect to see. We're seeing a gold rush, is what I've been calling it. Richard struck gold. Ethan himself wasn't sure he was going to strike the same level of gold. He just wanted, I'm guessing he wanted 40 to 50,000 and get his book out there, and that would help him do what he needed to do. And he is blowing up. And as you'd expect, other people in the community, not just the Comicsgate community, just the comics community, his peers, other people have their eyes on it. And, you know, it's funny because the comic community likes to pretend that Comicsgate doesn't exist. They like to pretend Ethan Van Sciver and Diversity in Comics, John Malin, these guys, they don't exist. They're out, whatever. And they sweep it under the rug. All the media publications just won't give them the time of day because they're just shills. But they are paying attention. Just because they're not talking about it, you guarantee they all are probably more aware than me of what's going on. And some of them are on our side, and they've been bullied to keeping silent. And then you're going to probably start to see a few who maybe weren't on our side, but, those paychecks look nice. And they're coming over, and they're starting to see a new way of delivering comics. And crowdfunding can be very lucrative. One of my other hobbies, even bigger than comics, I am into hobby board gaming. And crowdfunding completely changed the board game industry. It's the way to go to produce games nowadays. And there are games, board games, that get millions of dollars. That's millions, plural, of dollars in crowdfunding. And the reason why crowdfunding is so lucrative is because it cuts the middleman. In the board game industry, you have the designer, let's call him the publisher. That publisher has to get a game made. Then that publisher has to sell said game to a distributor. The distributor buys massive bulks, amount of that game, and then distributes those games to a network of retail outlets throughout the country. Those retail outlets then sell the game to you. So if a board game costs $50 to $60, because of the way that resale works, where you're typically, you have markup, and in board games, pretty good markup, about 35 to 50% markup on your games. That means a lot of times these games start off, they're selling for like $7. You sell your game for $8 to the distributor. The distributor then sells the game for, let's say $16 to $20 to the retailer. The retailer then doubles that price to you. You pay $40. You can see all that profit in between the publisher and you is lost. So it's natural you want to bypass that. And in the board gaming industry, it's taken it by fire. Comics isn't the exact same model, but there's a similar concept. Ethan, I'll just use Ethan as an example, and I want to disclaim, I love Ethan, I wish him well, I want him much success, but he's just a popular guy, so I'm going to use him as an example, makes way more money by self-producing this comic, not having DC take their cut, not having the distributors take their cut, not having the retail market take its cut. The only cut that Ethan takes, the only cut that he suffers is the cost of the production of the comic and the cost of mailing it out to you. Everything else, besides paying artists, people involved, goes in his pocket. And that's great. I mean, that's capitalism. I'm so glad for Ethan. He's essentially going to be rich off this one comic. Not wealthy, rich. And I hope he catapults us and continues his success and it goes further. But there's an underlying concern here that I have and I think other people are starting to see. We did not start Comicsgate, and I certainly didn't start Comicsgate, but the people that started Comicsgate and the people that came on board with Comicsgate didn't do so under the idea of like, oh, we want to see Ethan be rich. We want to see Richard C. Meyer be rich. I'm happy for them that they are. I want them to be successful. And I will buy product from them that I find is worthy of my attention. You know, if you make a comic and it's appealing and you offer me a good value for my money and my opinion, then we'll exchange. That's the normal reseller-consumer relationship. So while I don't begrudge any creators doing what they're doing, there runs the risk of a problem, and this happened in the board gaming industry, where this lust for money, for lack of a better term, I'm not trying to be disparaging, overrides the general idea that allowed you to get to this point in the first place. Because let's make no mistake, Richard C. Meyer and Ethan Van Sciver, even though Ethan is really popular pro and so forth, are catapulting these they're catapulting these projects off the immense popularity they've received from their leadership in the Comicsgate community. Both of them have legions of fans that would be fans regardless if they didn't publish any book. I mean, Richard's not publishing any books prior to this. He had an indie project in the past, but he's not what you would consider like a normal pro. And I don't think Ethan, I'm sure Ethan even understands that he couldn't, none of this Comicsgate stuff existed, he wasn't just leaving DC and saying, hey, I'm making a comic and I'm going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars and be the most successful kick-started comic of all time. That was not in his, that wasn't in his expectations. And I believe he's admitted so much based on his expectations originally of Cyberfrog. So now we have a problem. Is crowdfunding good or bad? Well, it's certainly good for creators who can make a lot of money out of it. And that's what capitalism is all about. You should make money. My concern comes from when you're going to do that, that's fine. But then do you continue to market yourself as a representative for the Comicsgate community and someone who's standing up for LCSs and trying to make this change and impact in the whole industry that we're seeing as a big problem? We're seeing loss of sales, 10% every year, comic shops closing. I backed Jawbreakers because Richard and John Malin and Brett Smith were not just making a cool comic. I was enticed by the comic, and I look forward to getting it and reading it. But I backed it because they were going to take the money. The original idea, the way it was sold to me, was some of those proceeds, after paying everyone for the job, which they should get, well compensated, to helping make an impact, to finding a publisher, to getting these books on stores. So when I saw the $25 price tag for essentially a 2-issue, 48-page, that's about 2 issues, deluxe format comic, you can call it a graphic novel if you want. That's not what I call that. I mean, that's kind of what The Dark Knight Returns was. Each issue was one of those. It's a bookshelf format comic. It's premium. It's not $25. But I was way okay with it because I was looking at it as contributing, as donating into a cause, into something bigger. And I'm still happy to do something like that. But what I'm seeing come out of that are new people saying, oh, these guys did it. Let's get our comic out there too. And they're following the same pattern. Well, how much do those sell for? Oh, they sold for $25. We'll sell for $25. But they're not promoting anything else. They're just saying, here's our comic, buy it. The biggest one for me is Red Rooster. Red Rooster looks fantastic. I really want to buy it. If you like it, buy it. By all means. If you don't know what it is, go look it up. It looks awesome. But it's $25 plus $10 shipping and handling. That's just for the basic tier. Now, some people have argued to me, well, you get all this other good stuff. You get like posters and bookmarks and t-shirts maybe and other stuff. Okay. I'm not arguing that it's not necessarily a value to some people or even a lot of people. But when you go to the comic book store every Wednesday, are you like you're like, oh man, I wish this $3.99 comic came with a t-shirt and bookmarks and posters. I'd pay $25 No, you wouldn't. Most people would not. That's not what we want. And the Comicsgate community when I came around last year, I was seeing a bunch of gripes about the overall cost of comics and how ridiculous the pricing is. And I agree. I mean, we railed, it wasn't like a month ago we were railing about how Amazing Spider-Man 800 was $9.99. It's twice the size of some of these books that are $25. So there's a problem here. And the problem is that some of these creators, there's this idea of, and I think DNC coined this, artisanal comics. Essentially high quality, crafted comics for a more discerning crowd. Okay, great. If you're one of those people that, doesn't drink scotch unless it's $150 a bottle or more, there's definitely an audience for that. Okay, that's not what I'm not that audience, And the majority of the audience isn't that way, which is why most liquor, even top shelf liquor, is a fraction of that price. Comics are meant to be a cheaper medium for most people. And again, I support capitalism, and there is a room for this, and go for it if you can make it happen. I believe the market share is very small, but the people that can be successful at it will probably make good profits. But I'm approaching this from a fan standpoint, from a consumer, and from someone who is concerned about the issues that Comicsgate brings to the table, which is the shrinking industry, the SJWs taking over, the overprice of comics, LCS is closing. That's where my concerns come from. I am not concerned that how many hundreds of thousands of dollars Richard C. Myron makes. He should be concerned with it. I don't know why I'm pointing at him like he's Richard. And more power to him. I want to, again, clarify, I'm in no way trying to be disparaging to anyone who's doing this. Just express my concerns of where this might go and how the message might get lost by people who are once promoting it, started waving the flag, all of a sudden start making a lot of money and going, oh, okay, suddenly I don't care as much about my cause anymore. So that's where I see. Let me know what you think about that. It's hard to talk about these things on Twitter when you get 200 and some characters. There's a lot to it. So I thought I'd make a video just expressing kind of where I was coming from. I hope my point was clear, whether or not you agreed with it or not. By the way, I was pointing at this picture. This is really cool. This is by Larry King, at Larry King Undead. He does these flip cover Fridays. And this was one he did based on Daredevil 182 by Frank Miller. Classic story. And I really love this. Not just because I'm a huge Frank Miller dork, but I've always said, even before Batman 50 came out, I was like, ooh, this marriage shouldn't happen. It would be so awesome. The way I would write Batman 50 is Selina gets killed at the altar. Someone snipes her, some villain. And it's basically Batman's origin all over again. He's stuck holding the dead body of someone he couldn't save, and it would this emasculated Batman that we've kind of been seeing in modern times would be restoked. He'd be reforged and tempered into the hardened character that Batman really should always be. If you want a softer family man character, you've got thousands of comic book characters. Why do Batman in that? I think that would be a fantastic story, but sadly, comic publishers hate killing their characters unless it's a super gimmick and it can make them a ton of money, like Death of Superman. And even then, of course, they don't act. They're never actually dead. But this is a great thing. Check out Larry King Undead. He's got other stuff. I love that picture. That's why that's there. Move the Needle. Move the Needle is something that Richard C. Meyer started to promote comic books. He had a contact in the industry that said, hey, everything what you're doing, it's cool and all, but it's going to mean nothing if you can't actually move the needle. So he started this hashtag, which I'm a huge supporter of. This is one of the best things I think Richard's ever done. And it's the idea of promoting comics rather than denigrating the people who are our opponents in this. Let's be positive rather than negative. And whenever possible you can do that, I am a supporter of it. So Richard did this Move the Needle, and the idea is that when someone recommends, like if I recommend a comic, if I recommend Batman 182, you should go buy this, and you do, that you get on Twitter and say, hey, Ash on Comics recommended, hey DC, I bought this because Ash recommended this. And it's not to promote me so much, but it's to show that you bought something because someone else recommended it. It's to show that people like myself, people like you, or anyone, are making a difference. That you're buying comics because we have a voice, and those voices are being heard. So if you recommend, if you get in my comments and you recommend something and I go and buy it, I'm going to say Move the Needle, and I'm going to put you. It has nothing to do with who you are. It's about you bought a comic based on recommendations. That's moving the needle. You weren't going to buy Batman 182 before. Does that make sense? What I'm starting to see with Move the Needle that concerns me is people just using it to be like, this is my normal pool of comics, move the needle. Well, those comics were already, scheduled to be bought. You didn't move any needle. Nothing changed your habit. Moving the needle is, hey, I would not have bought this. This was never going to be purchased. And then something happened that caused that to change and increase the sale of this comic. Recognize Disney, recognize creators. That's what Move the Needle is about. And I don't own this. Richard called me out several months ago, and I kind of got uppity about this. And it's I don't own this Move the Needle, so you don't necessarily have to listen to what I say. I'm not the judge, the law of Move the Needle. Do what you want. This is my encouragement. This is my suggestion. I think this is where Move the Needle is best, is when we treat it like this. So, in summary, when you're going to do a Move the Needle post, I encourage you to make it about new comics, number one. If you post, like, there's all these back issues that I bought of these old comics from the 60s, you didn't move any needle. I'm happy to see your post. By all means, share it. I love to see it. But Marvel, DC, or whatever, they got nothing out of those sales. You didn't do anything. Number two, good comics. I see so many Move the Needle posts, and it's just full of like, some good comics. It's just all over the board type of comics. I'm seeing people put, hey, DNC and Move the Needle, blah, 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 and people are posting comics that DNC ripped. Okay, well, he's not the law of what comics you should like. By all means, like what you like. But again, you're not moving the needle. If he says Champions is terrible, it's the worst comic ever, and you go buy it and say, hey, Richard, I've moved the needle. No, you were going to buy it anyway. You bought it in spite of the recommendation. You are not essentially a new customer. You're not someone who got won over. And then number 3, recommended comics. Again, that's kind of what I talked about in the beginning. So new comics, good comics, can't even speak. Recommended comics. Try to move the needle on those is what I suggest. I think it'll be a more powerful message if we focus on that, rather than just posting, here's comics, move the needle. It just becomes a watered down generic. It doesn't really say anything. But again, I fully disclaim I am not the the end all be all of Move the Needle. And finally, you know what? Before I do that, this was really funny. It wasn't actually funny. I should have had this up in the beginning with Steve Ditko. There's a Steve Ditko strip of Peter Parker running in with some student protesters, back in the 60s when liberalism was crazy like it is today. And they're trying to rope Peter Parker, and he just doesn't want anything to have to do with it. And then you see these other guys like, hey, look over there, he's with those marchers. Yeah, it's that lightweight Peter Parker, wouldn't you know it? And this struck me it's so poignant. Just being like, man, this echoes social media today. Of like, you even associate with someone. You walk by a Trump supporter and you say, hey, have a nice day. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, look at him. He's a Trump lover. And it's just like, dude, the guy just said hello. It echoes just basic human nature. And he doesn't even want to have anything to do with this. He's like, just get me out of here. But nope. They got to form their opinion. Your cousin likes Lawrence Welk. What an insult. Can you imagine? Go on back to Squaresville, you rosy-cheeked reactionary. And he's just having to hold back. And here's real Spider-Man, folks. I'd better cut out before giving them something to protest about. He knows he could whip the floor of all these guys. But because he's a hero, he restrains himself. But because he's a human, he still does have thoughts. See, that's the difference. What a hero does. A hero has human thoughts, but principles that keep them in check. And he doesn't beat up these idiots because that's not what a hero would do. And this is what real Peter Parker is. Fast forward to today. I actually did read some Ayn Rand at college. I spent a week thinking I was like the new John Galt. Yelled at some protesters. Fun times. God, I hate myself. This is SJW Cuck Peter Parker. This, Steve Ditko Peter Parker, real Peter Parker, beloved by the fans, one of the most iconic superheroes of all time. This is why we have Comicsgate. Because you shit on our characters, you shit on Steve Ditko. This was posted... Well, someone posted this after Steve Ditko died, not to malign Steve Ditko, but to illustrate the contrast of, look at what they're doing. I just thought this was appropriate to post. Yeah. Now, Donald DeLay. Good segue here. Donald DeLay, if you don't know him, is an up-and-coming comic artist. I guess his most prominent work is Death of Love, which I have not checked out, but I am very interested in. I especially like... This character catches my eye. You probably know why. He is notable, and I want to feature him because he's a really cool comics pro. He's a professional. He's someone you should get to know if you're a fan of comics on social media because he treats people professionally. This is a guy who I don't necessarily want to say is on our side. He's not necessarily a Comicsgater, but this is a guy who decided, I'm going to be open-minded. I'm not going to just groupthink. I'm going to check out this Richard C. Meyer guy for myself and see what he's all about. Is he really this total Nazi monster that everyone makes him out to be? And he did his research. And guess what? You guessed it. He did not find Richard to be these things that are claimed because he's not, because it's all lies. And when he thought for himself, when he stepped out of the echo chamber and said, let me see what the real world is actually like, he saw the truth. And then, all he did was make a comment and say, I looked and I did not find Richard to be the monster that he was made out to be, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And holy shitballs. As we all predicted as soon as he said that, and Richard, this is funny, Richard sent him DM telling him, dude, take me off your list, don't follow me, that you are going to get blacklisted in the industry. The SJWs are going to come at you full force. And he's like, nah, I'm cool, like, thank you for thinking about that, but I don't want to work in an industry where people would behave that way. And he didn't know the extent, because they don't reveal themselves like that. They always pretend to be the good guy. So all he did was say, Richard's not the monster that everyone made it out to be. Or I'm not seeing the monster. Something like that. Like he didn't even make a full judgment. He's just like, I don't see it. And they ousted him. They just completely were just like, screw you, you're done. And I'm featuring him because, number one, it's a great example of the bullshit, the bullying that pros have to go through behind the scenes. And I firmly believe Ethan Van Sciver when he says that there's a lot of other conservative pros out there, but they are terrified to reveal themselves. Because look what happened to Donald just for saying, I don't see where Richard's the monster. And if that's not enough, take a look at this. So here's some shots of a project called Kill Blood that Donald was working on with a partner. Look at this gorgeous line art. I love this work. It's the style appeals to me. It's not a traditional orthodox comic style, but yet neither is it so wackadoo that you're just like, oh, this is no place in normal comics. He stated that one of the comics he would love to do is Lobo. And look at this style. I mean, imagine how fit he would be for a Lobo comic. So this is the Kill Blood project. Here's what it looks like with colors. I was just like, wow. Stunning. Like, 3/4 or more of Marvel Comics, the supposed gold standard of comic books, aren't this good as far as art. Well, writing too. I mean, so this project was with Justin Jordan, who's currently writing for DC. He's writing 2 of the New Age of Heroes books, Silencer and Brimstone. these are two books that I refused to buy because I already knew the guy was an SJW. He's a jerk. And I was really disappointed that DC had two of their books from that exciting new line, which I'm a big advocate for. See my other videos about. Justin basically just canceled on him. I don't know all the full details, but essentially what happened was this project's now dead. Justin Jordan doesn't want to work with Donald because Donald doesn't think Richard C. Meyer's a monster. This is the problem with the industry today. This is the bullying that we have to witness, that these guys have to suffer, and that needs to be fixed. So in summary, the different things that I talked about, with the crowdfunding and the move the needle, my opinions all kind of center around what's happening to pros like Donald. And I care about this because I care about comics. My agenda is not to see Donald make hundreds of thousands of dollars on his next comic. I'm happy if he does. I will cheer for him. That's not my agenda. My agenda is to see comics good. And for people like Donald to have a place where he can thrive, where he can succeed on his merits or fail on his merits. Let us have a fair place. Let's not make comics a political dystopia of, you either are a card-carrying party member or you're in the gulag. This is terrible. And I want to feature this guy. If you're not aware of him, many of you are. Look him up on Twitter. He's fun to follow. He's really good-natured. We've been joking about pizza lately and his dislike of pineapple on pizza. And it's just been for some good, fun tweets. And he's obviously talented as F. So, I hope you found something worthwhile in this video. You enjoyed watching it. I hope if you have anything to say, if you're any time watching going, oh God, Ash, you moron, what do you think? Put it in the comments. I want to hear. I don't want to hear you call me a moron, but tell me some things I need to know. Definitely I don't know everything. I'm not making this video because I'm an expert on comics. I'm making this video because I'm a fan of comics. This is what I know. This is what, if I were in this comic book shop and you were in the comic book shop and we started talking about stuff, we would talk about. That's what this is about. So if you're going to make a post and just be like, oh man, you need to research more, learn more. I admit it. You're right. That's kind of why I make this post, because this will expose what I don't know. And you, as someone who do know, can say, hey, let me fill in the holes. If you agree, tell me what you agree with, too. I don't want to just hear negative stuff. But most of all, I just want you to be able to watch and feel like there's a conversation to be held, to share opinions, hear opinions. I try to make my videos based on the idea of what I like to watch in other people's videos, so it's not going to be for everyone, I understand, but hopefully it's for a few. My channel's been growing. I'm up to, I think, 18 members. You! Superstar. So take care. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again. Bye.